We got Carlos from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I don't want Vince McMahon to ever return to WWE. I have nothing positive to say about him, and I think he became a negative creatively to the company. I think WWE under TKO is doing quote unquote better, both creatively and financially, although I don't tune into the shows weekly and their financials don't affect me one bit. My question to you is, what were some of the things that were better under Vince McMahon? Well, you probably would think that I'm going to sit here and say nothing, but I can't say that. There's actually a few things. The biggest one being affordability. Affordability. It was far more affordable to attend a live show under Vince McMahon than it is today with TKO running the show. Another thing is we didn't have this level of commercialization that we have today. Now, I do think eventually he would have acquiesced because he just would not have been able to turn down the money that was being offered. But it's just so heavily prominent in the product now. And under Vince, it wasn't this bad. It wasn't at that level. He also allowed there to be more than 5 matches on most PLEs. And I don't want much more than that. But this need to keep the number to 5 on all of these shows, right, save for the big ones like Mania and SummerSlam, which are 2 nights, I'm not a fan of doing it all the time the way that they do. You know, some of these 5-match PLEs end up being excellent shows, but there are shows that can absolutely accommodate an extra match, but they just won't do it. Because then Jey Uso can't yeet as much on his way down to the ring. And we can't have 25-minute intermissions between all the matches. And I'll throw one more at you. The WWE Network. The WWE Network was truly one of Vince McMahon's greatest creations. Like, we didn't know just how good we had it at that time. I miss the network greatly. I love the Vault channel on YouTube. I think it's great. But having that one centralized place for the library, plus some of the original shows, they had Legends House, they had the Edge and Christian show, those Legends roundtables, like that's from the early days. Like those were the WWE 24/7 days, I think, even before the network started. 24/7 was like a 24/7 service that predated the network that was only available on certain cable services. Mine wasn't one of them, although I was eventually able to see the Legends roundtable shows. Like original content like that, coupled with the library and access, essentially free access to the pay-per-views. You put all that together in the WWE Network, like it was the perfect blend. And now they've sold off pieces of their soul to different bidders, right, to the highest bidder. And we still don't even have a dedicated home for the Monday Night Raw library, if you want to go back and pick out a specific episode. All of those things were better under Vince McMahon. And still, there is not a day that goes by that I sit here wishing that that man was back in power. I don't ever want to see him back in power ever again. Vince in Fredericksburg, Virginia. When Bret Hart went to WCW, do you think WWF's mentions of him by Shawn Michaels and the Vince McMahon Bret Screwed Bret interview caused WCW to rush his debut? If so, what would have been a better way to debut him? So I get this question, or a variation of this question every now and then. And I know I've answered it before. First of all, I wouldn't say they rushed it. You know, he debuted in mid-December, right before Starrcade. So they let a month go by before he ever showed up on TV. He may not have been contractually available to show up on TV before then. Because I do remember that one of the ideas that was discussed when they were trying to figure out how to handle this whole Montreal situation was, why don't we, do I think it was a 4-way match on the In Your House show at the beginning of December, right? The month after Survivor Series. And then he would drop the title there. So contractually, he may not have even been available to WCW until mid-December, but he didn't show up until, over a month, like 4 or 5 weeks after the Montreal Screwjob. But the way they debuted him was completely ludicrous, right? They debuted him as the special referee for an Eric Bischoff match, of all things. Like, that's how you debut the man that you're paying $3 million a year to? And I rebooked his entire first year once in WCW when I answered this previously. What I would have done, I'll just run through this quickly. What I would have done is I would have saved him as a surprise for Starrcade. So I would not have put him on Nitro and had him come out and say, oh, he's going to be the referee for Eric Bischoff's match, because the whole thing was like Bischoff thought he had it in the bag, right? Oh, I got Bret. We just gave Bret a big fat contract. He's going to be on my side here. And then Bret tells him, I'm calling it right down the middle, right? And Bischoff looks like he's going to shit a brick. But that's how they debuted Bret on TV. I wouldn't have even put him on TV first. I would have saved him as a surprise for Starrcade, their biggest show of the year. He comes out to ward off the NWO when they get involved in the Sting-Hogan main event, and it leads to Sting winning the championship, right? Which he did anyway. And Sting is in the ring, and he's celebrating with the roster, and then Bret comes back out. All the WCW guys in the ring, right? They just sort of like part the Red Sea. They don't know what he's going to do. And Bret puts his hand out, and the two men shake hands to close the show, and Bret raises Sting's arm. And from there, Bret makes it his mission to bring down the NWO, from within. Now he's part of WCW. He's going to bring down the NWO with the help of some of the big WCW names like Sting and Ric Flair. Like, that's his mission statement. And Hogan gets the belt back so that he can drop it to Goldberg in 98, just like he did. And that way you got Goldberg, white hot as the champion, while Bret is fighting the good fight to try to kill off Hogan and kill off the NWO once and for all. And we get that first big Bret Hart Hollywood Hogan match on pay-per-view, not on a random Nitro like they did in 98. And if I remember correctly, I think Bret went heel at the end of like that. I don't even want to talk about it. Like, the way they handled him just in general was just such a fucking disaster. But I remember him and Hogan having that first big televised match, and the way it ended was just ridiculous. So instead, you do their first match on pay-per-view. You get a double main event out of it at Halloween Havoc. So you got Goldberg defending the belt against DDP in the main event, and you have Bret beating Hogan. And that ends the NWO, at least that incarnation of the NWO. Bret goes on, he wins the World War III Battle Royal in November, comes down to him and Sting, and we get Bret Hart winning the Battle Royal, and then we get Bret Hart against Goldberg, yes, at Starrcade, 1 year after Bret made his debut, and 1 year before the two of them actually ended up wrestling at Starrcade, and we all know what happened there. But you have that as your main event at Starrcade in 98, and Bret cheats to win the title, with the story being that he masqueraded that entire year as the savior of WCW, like as if he gave a shit. He didn't give a shit. He never cared. It was always about becoming champion. It's what drives him, right? He was never beaten for the belt up north, so he was here to take what he felt was rightfully his. And now you head into 1999 with Bret as the heel champion, and you can run through a whole bunch of matches with him defending against their top babyfaces. And then ultimately he drops the belt to Sting, because that's how this all started. He came in 97 to help Sting. That's how Starrcade ended in 97. And Sting is the franchise of WCW, so it kind of comes full circle. And so this way, whatever Bret lacked, in star power in WCW, like, people knew who he was, but like, he wasn't the biggest star when he came in. He had a lot of buzz around him after what happened in Montreal, but he wasn't bigger than Hogan or anything like that. That's why you give him that first year to really build himself up and position himself as someone who wants to, take down the evil empire, only for him to reveal his true colors in the end. And as great as that heel run was for him in 97, we get another version of it heading into 99. Hell, maybe he even tries to, put some version of the Hart Foundation back together. You see, Bischoff could have done all of this, but he was always up Hogan's ass so much that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. But by all means, throw $9 million at the guy to book him like a mid-carder. That's a great idea.